For the sake of YouTube's strict copyright rules, this episode of Awesome Albums doesn't include the music. You are welcome to continue watching this version, but I recommend going to the Awesome Albums website or the other link below to enjoy the Awesome Albums episode the way I intended it to be heard. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed the episode.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of Awesome Albums with Awesome Andrew. Last time we talked about the artist who got inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2025, and I said I would pick an album by one of those artists, and yeah, we all knew it was going to be Bad Company. I mean, I did say in 2020 that Bad Company topped my list of artists I'd like to see get into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and they finally did, and what better way to talk about Bad Company than talking about their debut album. Before we get much further, let's introduce the band. Paul Rodgers, our lead singer, and also plays piano and some guitar. Mick Ralphs, who plays lead guitar and some keyboards. Boz Burrell, who plays bass, and Simon Kirke on drums. Since we're taking a look at a debut album, we gotta take a look at their origin story on how the band was formed and recorded this album, so let's dive into that. But before talking about Bad Company, we need to take a look at the breakup of the band Free, which was the band that Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirke came from. Tensions escalated between Paul Rodgers and bassist Andy Fraser, which dissolved the band in May of 1971. During this time, Paul Rodgers started a new band called Peace with Mick Underwood on drums and Stuart McDonald on bass. They opened for Mott the Hoople when they were touring in the US. Paul Rodgers met Mott's guitarist, Mick Ralphs. Ralphs was getting a little frustrated with Mott the Hoople, who felt that some of his writing contributions were being snuffed out because they didn't fit the direction the band wanted to go. Mick Ralphs played for Paul Rodgers 2 songs he had written, Can't Get Enough, which Rodgers fell in love with immediately. That was the exact kind of song that he was looking for. Ralphs also played Ready for Love, which was featured on Mott the Hoople's album All the Young Dudes, featuring Mick Ralphs on vocals. We'll go into detail on both those songs later in the video, so stay tuned. Anyway, Paul and Mick really hit it off. Simon Kirke said, "You couldn't have been further away from Paul Kossoff than Mick Ralphs." Paul Kossoff being Free's guitarist. "I wasn't interested in any more geniuses. Mick drank, of course he drank, he was from Hereford. But he was great fun, and he brought Rodgers out of his shell. By the end of Free, Paul had his back to the audience. He didn't want to know. Then Ralphs came along with his Max Wall impressions, and the whole thing changed, and for the better. Paul really blossomed with Mick," end quote. Free reformed in January of 1972. The band made an effort to make it work as efficiently as possible for Paul Kossoff's sake, who was suffering from an addiction to Mandrax, and decided that all songs be credited to every member of the band, regardless to who actually wrote them. They released their album Free at Last in June of 1972. That fall, they got started on their next album, Heartbreaker, which became the band's final album, released in January of 1973. Andy Fraser had left the band by this point, and Paul Kossoff's addiction continued to be a problem, so they had to bring in a couple new members to finish the album, bringing in Tetsu Yamauchi as the new bass player, and John Rabbit Bundrick to become the band's keyboard player to compensate for the increasingly unreliable Paul Kossoff. William Garrett Snuffy Walden was eventually brought in to cover for Kossoff, which Kossoff was resentful of. In early mid-1973, Free disbands after years of internal struggles. When Mick Ralphs left Mott the Hoople to join Paul Rodgers' new band, they called up Simon Kirke, which Paul had known since the creation of Free in 1968. All they now needed was a bass player, and after auditioning over a dozen candidates, Boz Burrell, who is best known as a member of King Crimson for the past year or so, joins the band as their new bass player. Mick Ralphs said, "We had nearly given up when Boz wandered in one day," end quote. In late 1973, the band was playing at a Surrey Village Hall rehearsal, and Peter Grant, the manager for Led Zeppelin, heard them and loved their raw sound and signs them on immediately. I've read that Peter Grant may have been encouraged by Free's former touring manager Clive Colson to check them out. They waited all afternoon for him to show up, only to discover that he wanted to catch an unmediated earful of what they did and waited outside to listen to them rehearse. I also read somewhere that Grant might have brought Burrell into the band to complete the lineup. The band was signed to Swan Song Records, Atlantic Records in North America, with Island Records in other countries. Now that the band has been fully put together, they have a manager and even a record label, the last thing to do is to record the album. Bad Company recorded at Headley Grange, which Zeppelin fans would recognize as the place where Zepp recorded their third and fourth albums, By the way, I have a video on Led Zeppelin 4, check that out. Led Zeppelin had a bit of downtime when John Paul Jones had the flu, so he was down for a couple weeks. The band spent 10 days in November recording their album using Ronnie Lane's mobile studio parked outside. The band produces the album with engineer Ron Nevison. Peter Grant told the band to worry about the music and he would take care of the rest. The last thing the band needed to do is have a name. Without spoiling too much about the title track, Paul Rodgers shared with Mick the name of the song he was working on. Mick loved the name so much he suggested that to be the name of the band. Peter Grant hated the name though. Paul Rodgers said, "I had to fight to get the management and record company to accept the name Bad Company," end quote. Various marketers suggested the name to be too negative for the band, but Rodgers was set on the imagery of Bad Company, and eventually the name stuck. The band had their live debut at the Newcastle City Hall on March 8, 1974 to a sold-out crowd. This was part of a short 9-day UK tour that kicked off their live career. Though one fan blog said March 9th at the same venue, noting it was a big deal as the supergroup's launch with tickets selling out fast due to the hype from Free and Mott the Hoople fans. Bad Company's debut album was released on May 24th, 1974. After their live debut and album release, Bad Company hit the road hard. They opened for heavyweights like Edgar Winter, ZZ Top, Santana, and Joe Cocker, often low on the bill at festivals and tours, including sharing the stage with The Who at the Charlton Athletic Football Club outdoor event in May, but by September they were headlining New York's prestigious Woolman Rink in Central Park. When they returned to America the following spring, they had already jumped to headliner status at major arenas like Philadelphia Spectrum and the Dallas Convention Center, proof of how quickly their raw power and killer debut album turned them into a force to be reckoned with. Now that we've looked at their history, let's take a look at the album cover. It's a very simple black and white album cover, abbreviated to just BADCO, running from the bottom left-hand corner to the right-hand top corner. The back cover is just black with the track listing and credits, and the gatefold is a photo of the band. The album cover sleeve design and photography was done by Hypnosis. Honestly, it's a very simple album cover, not much to say. Let's move on to the music. All songs sang by Paul Rodgers. Our opening track for the album was written by Mick Ralphs, as I mentioned earlier, a song that was rejected by Mott the Hoople, but it was the kind of song and sound that Paul Rodgers was looking for. Mick Ralphs tuned his guitar in the opening C, tuning C, C, G, C, E, C. Mick Ralphs said, "It never really sounds right in standard tuning. It needs the open C to have that ring," end quote. It borrows from the riff that Mick Ralphs used for his 1972 Mott song, One of the Boys. Paul Rodgers joins Ralphs on guitar playing rhythm. But spending so much time introducing the song, I had to skip over the count-in and the drum beats. Simon Kirke explained, "We were all scattered all over this country house. Bad Company were doing their first album, and I believe it was one of the first songs we did. I was in the basement, Boz, the bass player, in the boiler room. Mick Ralphs and Paul Rodgers were up in the main living room where the guitar amps were. So in order to get their attention, because we couldn't see each other, I did the count 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, and then I did this gabra to get everyone's attention, and that's how we kicked it off. It was born out of necessity," end quote. The song was a huge hit for Bad Company and was the debut single released on May 10th, 1974. It reached number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 singles chart and number 1 on Cashbox magazine's Top 100 singles chart. It was one of their biggest and most popular songs, being played frequently on classic rock radio stations. Billboard described it as a good, solid rocker and praised Paul Rodgers' vocal performance. Cashbox called it one of the best rockers to come out of Britain in years, describing it as top 40 oriented with a heavier flair. Record World said that lead singer Paul Rodgers is just enough of a controlled powerhouse to turn this into a solid top 40 item. Classic rock critic Malcolm Dome rated it as Bad Company's second best song, saying that it combines a shuffling riff with a classic melody, all done with a big production that still sounds intimate, end quote. Classic rock history critic Janie Roberts rated it as Bad Company's third best song, saying that the 3-chord progression to Can't Get Enough became a favorite of young guitar players growing up in the 1970s. Ultimate classic rock critic Matt Wardlaw rated it as Bad Company's fifth best song, saying that the song finds Paul Rodgers exuding complete confidence in his ability to land the girl that he wants, end quote. Basically, the song is really good and everyone agrees. This is another song that is often called a classic rock radio staple in retrospectives. Though it wasn't a single, fans and critics praise it as a high point for its driving pace and Rodgers' powerful delivery. It's often called a straight-ahead, high-energy blues rocker. It keeps the intensity rolling after the opener, described in reviews as maintaining the album's swagger with a steady groove fitting the song's name. Paul Rodgers reflected on the debut album in the song, saying that it's grouped as part of the no-frills rock ethos they aimed for post-free. This was another song written by Mick Ralphs during his days in Mott the Hoople, and if you listen to their version, like I said earlier, you'll hear Mick Ralphs sing it. The song wasn't a single, but was another popular song from the album. Paul Rodgers said, "I found out they had already recorded Ready for Love, and I thought, oh, I don't care. It was such a good song and a good vehicle for my voice, a great composition, one of Mick's finest actually, possibly his best," end quote. Paul Rodgers also said, "I don't like the lyrics to be overbearing, I like them to say something, but I'm not trying to change the world overnight. Something simple and understandable that people can relate their own everyday experiences in." Mick also writes the same way. "We do a song that's been knocking around for years called Ready for Love. They played in Mott, but we treat it completely differently, more like a heavy ballad. We play the number as we hear it, rather than trying to make it more than it is. It's very mellow, and we do it at a speed where I can get my words over so they're not rushed. I always try to write lyrics I can actually speak, like if I'm talking to a chick, then I'd want to say certain things without embarrassment. It has to be simple," end quote. Matt Wardlaw of Ultimate Classic Rock rated the song as Bad Company's 6th best song, saying that the Bad Company version is a touch more moody than the original, which has an extra bit of swagger. He also praised Rodgers' vocal, saying that they walk with the shackles of a man who has been denied what he wants for way too long, end quote. Malcolm Dome of Classic Rock rated it as their 7th best song, saying that it has the atmosphere of someone trying to convince his lover things are changing for the better, and also praised the song's simplicity and acuity. Sue Glover and Sonny Leslie joined Bad Company with some backing vocals. Co-written by Rodgers and Ralphs, the song brings in some Stax Memphis soul influence, which is rare for the album's otherwise stripped-down sound. It's a mid-tempo rocker with Rodgers on piano. The lyrics lean emotional and relationship-focused. Some reviews note the title echoes John Lennon's 1969 Beatles song, but I think that's just coincidental, both songs sharing the same name. There is no direct connection, and no one in the band commented on that either. Ooh, the album's title track, and I guess you can call the song the band's theme song? In fact, Paul Rodgers said, "I think because it had never really been done, as far as I knew, I thought it was interesting to come out as a brand new band with its own theme song," end quote. The song's intro is very moody and atmospheric. Paul Rodgers said, "When I did the vocals for Bad Company, we put a microphone and headphones about 100 yards out in this field in the dead of night, with just the moonlight to get an amazing atmosphere. So that's why there's quite a haunting sound to the voice. It was done in the middle of the night with the moon shining down, and we cut it in one take. It took about 3 hours to set up, with wires and leads and everything, but when the time came, there it was, and we just did it in the one take," end quote. This setup and stunt actually made the Guinness record for the longest microphone string setup in recording history. The band name obviously came from the song. Ralphs freaked out over the phone when Rodgers mentioned he was working on a tune called Bad Company, and insisted that's what they call the group. Rodgers initially said, "No, it's just a song," but Ralphs convinced him, and the song name Bad Company became the band's name too. Now, the common story was the band was inspired by the 1972 movie of the same name, starring Jeff Bridges and Barry Brown, playing a couple of draft dodgers from the American Civil War, and an obvious allegory for Vietnam. However, Paul Rodgers stated in an interview with Spinner.com that the idea came from a book of Victorian morals that showed a picture of an innocent child looking up at an unsavory character leaning against a lamppost. The caption read, "Beware of Bad Company." Oh, and both Matt Wardlaw and Malcolm Dome rated this as Bad Company's best song. Wardlaw praised the legendary piano opening, and Dome praised the dusty atmosphere, as well as Rodgers' almost enigmatic vocals and Ralph's haunting guitar chime. Awesome Albums rated the song at number 2 on its top 10 Bad Company songs. Probably destroyed any and all credibility I have to rank the song at number 2 and not number 1, but come on guys, it was super close. This is a great mid-tempo song featuring Mel Collins at King Crimson playing saxophone. The song is often called lumbering or moody in reviews, with lyrics introspective about personal choices. In album overviews, it's often highlighted as part of the debut album's diversity, from blues rock to soul-tinged. This is the second single released for the album, released in January of 1975. It reached number 19 on the Billboard Hot 100 and number 30 in Canada. But what if I told you that the Bad Company version isn't the original version of the single, and I don't mean Mott the Hoople either? Hackensack, a heavy blues rock group which formed in 1969, was formed to Island Records toured with Mott the Hoople's Rock and Roll Circus, and later with Free, as well as overseas tours in Holland, Germany, and Switzerland. They released their version of Movin' On in November of 1972 and became John Peel's Play of the Week on Radio 1, but failed to make the top 40. Bad Company's version is way better known. The Washington Courthouse Record Herald described the lyrics as fitting a roadie's lifestyle. And I'm moving on from town to town, never seem to touch the ground. Rolling Stone critic Bud Scappa said that Movin' On contains nothing that hasn't been done 1,000 times before, but sounds irresistibly fresh. Classic rock history critic Janie Roberts rated Movin' On as Bad Company's 7th best song, calling it one of the most soulful songs that Bad Company ever released. Roberts also said that it was an FM Deep Tracks radio favorite in the 1970s and one of Bad Company's most soulful songs. Yeah, this album has just one great song after another. This is the final song on the album. It's a simple acoustic song that combines Rogers' lyrics and melody and Ralph's chorus arrangement. The song was completed with Rogers sitting outside in part of the Headley Grange Gardens at night. Paul Rogers, in a Classic Rock Revisited interview, said, "Every song that we have done has its own story. Seagull was written sitting on the beach. Music is about atmosphere. The best way to create the atmosphere is to actually be there. You don't have to imagine it. It is right there. With Seagull, you can see the horizon. You can include that in the songs. That is what writing songs is all about, creating mood and atmosphere," unquote. The lyrics reflect freedom, life's uncertainties, and a carefree existence. The seagull is flying without asking why, contrasting the burdens of the world. It's often interpreted as admiring the bird's effortless life while the narrator feels weighed down. Now, we're not done with the video just yet. We've got a couple B-side singles that I want to talk about real quick. Little Misfortune was released as the B-side for Can't Get Enough. It was co-written by Paul Rogers and Mick Ralphs. It's a brooding blues rocker with a gritty, down-on-his-luck vibe. The lyrics personify misfortune as various Miss characters. Little misfortune hit me and I'm down. Little misunderstanding ran me out of town. Little mistake, she don't understand. It fits the album's raw, no-frills hard rock sound, but a slightly darker, more narrative edge. A demo version, Demo Reel 1, surfaced later and was included on reissues. It's rougher, and it shows the song's early evolution. Easy on My Soul was released as the B-side of Movin' On. It's a soulful, mid-tempo ballad with introspective lyrics pondering love and life. Some say love is, some say what is love, some say is love really all around me. It has a pleading, emotional tone with piano from Rogers and a groove that echoes his Free-era influences. And speaking of Free, this actually is a Free song. The song originally appeared on Free's final album, Heartbreaker. Rogers brought the song with him to Bad Company and reworked it with his new band, giving it a fresh arrangement while keeping the core melody and sentiment. In fans' discussions and YouTube comments, people note how it bridges Free and Bad Company, with some preferring the more polished Bad Company version, while others prefer the Free version where it's more raw. And that concludes the album, and what a powerful debut album this was. I've not made a top 10 list of top 10 debut albums of all time, but man, this is a good one. It reached number 1 on the Billboard 200 in the US, it hit number 10 on the UK charts on June 15, 1974, and reached number 3 in the second week. It spent 25 weeks in UK charts too. Kerrang! Magazine listed the album at number 40 among the 100 greatest heavy metal albums of all time. The album was certified 5 times platinum in the US for selling over 5 million copies and became the 46th best-selling album of the 1970s. This has been Awesome Andrew telling you that Bad Company's debut album is an awesome album. And I'll see you guys in another video. See you then.